on down the road, because I think this pressure isn't going anywhere. But I think in the near term, we need to do exactly what the state's been doing, to keep this extremely tight. The only medical benefit I've heard of is for epilepsy, potentially. It is an herb that's part of the earth that God created, and there might be other benefits. But I think we know that there's harm from it. We know that they're having problems in other states that have legalized it with DUIs and stuff like that, and they don't even have breathalyzers for it, but people are driving impaired. So I think we really need to watch out with that and just find out more information and kind of go the direction the state's been going.
This is an issue where I truly think the federal government has failed us on their classifications. Because when they classify this, and I don't remember the exact term, I know
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1. When they schedule it as when they have it as Schedule 1, we can't even go back and do a proper analysis of what it is. Herbs, plants, they're all here for our use, but we have to be able to have the mechanism so that we can go down through and do it in a professional way, and the research is done all the way through so that we understand exactly how it can benefit us and also how it can hurt us. So I'm not in favor of the toe stepping towards the recreational marijuana that seems to take place. You just look around us, you see the different states and how they kind of started. That's a problem for me. But again, our federal government has failed us in this area. They're not taking any action on it, and they should take action on it so that we can actually go through the proper process.
Thanks. I'll just say a couple things. As your U.S. Senator, I'd focus on moving it off. Exactly. Commissioner Lee is entirely right. Schedule 1, 4 closed, can't do any studies on it. Let's move it to Schedule 2 so we can actually get the studies and get the evidence that we need so that milligram per kilogram dosing and the version that you use, sublingual, injection, whether you're using a cream or a lotion or a gummy bear or a brownie, which I don't recommend consuming it that way. But it's one of those, how do we dose this stuff up? What is it used for? I need to know that as a doctor before I start prescribing that. The second thing is we have outstanding leadership in the version of Representative Daw. He has been excellent in representing this issue, and I endorse everything that he's been doing. I've voted for his bill, and actually I think we're going to hear a little bit more from him about this. So I'll just cede the rest of my time to other voices.
I think Mike said it right, and it is a failure that, again, this is where I'm a big believer in pushing things back to the states to give that authority, that we can't study it. We all know, we've lost 3 kids in our neighborhood over the last decade to opioid, heroin use. We know that comes from a plant, and yet we've been able to do it, to get the opioid-based stuff. But people need to be able to study it. And the biggest thing that you'll have with the conversation right now is, does it work, does it work? Well, the reason that is so not definitive is because we haven't been able to study it. But I also do believe in a patient and a doctor's confidentiality. If a doctor believes that that's the best thing for that, then I think that's why I do support Brad's method, to be able to have that, because I do have people that have gone through chemotherapy that told me that, if they had an option to help them with the nauseous, they would have taken it. So that needs to be studied. But the federal government has prevented the states from settling on it.
I'll try to be brief. Really, what these gentlemen said is right on point. The federal government has utterly failed in this respect. The fact is, the cannabis plant, the marijuana plant, does have some medicinal qualities. Now, you asked me that 10 years ago. I would have told you, look, when I grew up in Idaho, marijuana was what the weirdos went behind the barn and smoked to get high. It had no benefit at all. But now we're hearing about places where Dravet syndrome, which is severe epilepsy, responds to cannabidiol. That's a constituent from the plant. It appears to work for pain management, for MS spasticity. So there are some conditions for which there's some interesting evidence that it works for. But, as has been mentioned, we don't have all the information. I go to Dr. Kennedy and say, I need some cannabis or something. Well, he look at him crazy. He does anyway. But, and it's not that he doesn't, it's not that he's not incompetent, it's just that he doesn't know because the evidence isn't there. He doesn't know what to prescribe. He doesn't know that, like you said, milligram per kilogram, all the kinds of things that doctors need in order to make a proper diagnosis. And so if the feds aren't going to do it, and if there is benefit to the plant, then I feel we have a moral obligation as a state to try to find the best route that helps our people. Now, we've seen other states do it in a way that I completely disagree with. You look at Colorado, one of the issues out there, am I done? 10 more seconds?
I didn't take all my time. You can give me the
One of the issues out there is Colorado just posted a report. They are having a record number of deaths from drug overdose. And right at the top of it is prescription drugs. Heroin's gone down a little bit, but meth's gone through the roof. And so this notion that having a medical cannabis regime somehow helps that may be true, but not the way Colorado's doing it, and not the way the initiative does it. So there is a way, but it needs to be thoughtful, deliberate, based on science. Sorry to take too much time.
Now, I want to go back to the previous question real quick, and then I'll get to this. I applaud both Mike and Chris on their position of saying they're willing to shut the government down. And the reason why I say this, I say this as a federal government employee. The conservative employees within the government supported it being shut down. I supported Mike Kennedy when he shut us down several years ago. And that personally affected me. But Cammie and I knew that we were subjected to a possible shutdown every year. And so we budgeted for that. We were prepared for that. If the government needs to be shut down to help preserve our future, I'm for it. And thank you, gentlemen. And that. The medical marijuana. Last year's bill, I did not support, and I was firmly against it. And Representative Kennedy actually asked me to come up on the Hill, and I participated in some of those meetings and discussions up there. And I appreciated his calling me and asking what my opinion as a law enforcement officer was. This year, the bill that Representative Daw ran, I did support because it's taking a slow, methodical, and an educated approach. And I do not want to see families criminalized that are trying to help their children. I don't believe in going after the individuals that are addicts. I want to go after the drug dealers, and that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Okay, this is the last question. The next one.
Okay, so talking about liberty, nothing quite affects our liberty like taxation does. And this isn't a question about raising or lowering taxes. This is a question about your principles on what types of taxes do you think are most appropriate for the area you're in. We have county, we have state, we have federal across the board here. We have income taxes, property taxes, tariffs, sales taxes. There's a whole range of different ways to help fund, because we know we have to fund things, we need to tax. So in your particular area that you're running for, in your opinion, what do you like, what method of taxation do you think is most appropriate for your area and why?
30 seconds each.
Okay, well, this is a pretty easy one for me. You have three main taxes, of course: income, property, and sales. And while I don't think any of us like any form of taxation, I think the sales tax is preferable to income and property tax. With income tax, it's horrible. You're being taxed on the fruit of your labors, and not only that, but it's not applied evenly. It's regressive, so it's very unfair and unjust, I believe. The property tax, the problem with it is you never really own your property. You're always paying a fee to use it.
So the county uses property tax and sales tax. Those are the two main taxes. I hate the property tax because just what Colton said, you don't really own your property, but you have to replace that because in the county right now it's about $30 million out of our $86 million budget that we have, and so it has to be replaced with something else in the way of going forward. What that would be, I don't know. I like kind of a consumer tax where if you're using it, then there's a tax on it. That way it seems, and I'm done already.
So the property tax is the most egregious tax. You can never own your property. I fully agree with that. The second thing is this fellow routinely has voted against every tax increase coming across his desk in the state legislature. I just think it has to be a really important tax for me to foist it upon you. And local taxes are more accountable and more controllable. So county and city, if you need to raise money for local roads, go ahead and do it. But this fellow has been voting against taxes, especially this year. Your property tax, of all things, is going up. And we had a $700 million surplus. Actually, maybe it was $600 million. I'll just give or take $100 million. What does it matter up there, right? But we had a surplus and we still raised your taxes. I voted against that too. I just think we ought to be using that surplus to do the fundamentals of government, not raising taxes on you people.
On what I said, property tax I do fear the most, just because you don't own it, and it especially hits seniors. Interesting enough, one of the reasons that I'm running is last year there was 3 of us in the primary, and I did get hit from one of the candidates saying that I increased everybody's property tax or everybody's tax. And actually, it was just the opposite. What I did is what was happening in Salt Lake County is you'd have, and especially with older individuals that had lived on a homestead out in the county for years, and then everything had grown up. Oh, I'm done. I can't, I will explain, come to me after it. Anyway, yeah, I'll talk to you later.
I'll give you 2 quick thoughts here. Number one, when it comes to taxation, you need to start with the fundamental principle of don't feed the beast. What I mean by that is if you're not spending, you don't need to collect it. Number 2, about property tax. How many here hate property tax? Good. Let's fund by property tax because we'll be terrified to raise it. Just a thought. Okay, I mean, it's a very visible tax. It doesn't mean we want to have it be high, but the fact is that's one that's very, very hard to raise. Other than that, keep the base broad and keep the rate low.
My role relating to taxes would be that the sheriff's office budget, the majority of Utah County's budget is spent at the sheriff's office level. I am the only candidate that is stating on day one, I will request Auditor John Dougal to do an audit of the sheriff's office because I first want to make sure where we're at and that every tax dollar that's being spent at the sheriff's office is being spent appropriately and that we're accounting for each item that is purchased. I'm done.
Bill, your question.
So my question is mainly for the 2 legislators, legislative candidates, and the 2 federal candidates, and that is, what is your position on an Article 5 convention?
Restate the question. Constitutional convention.
I can see that.
Article 5.
Article 5 convention is a convention where the states get called into convention by Congress upon 2/3 of the request, 2/3 of the states requesting to propose amendments to the U.S. Constitution. I've stated before that my constituents have made it very clear that they are not comfortable with an Article 5 convention until we get to the point where that becomes necessary. I have, in the past few years, not voted for one and will continue to not vote for one.
The biggest problem that we have right now is people aren't following the Constitution that we actually have. So that's one of the things that I promised there. I do have a record. I've never voted for an Article 5 convention when I was in the Utah Legislature. But I got to do one a traditional way. But the biggest problem that I see that we face is, and frankly, it's a little frustrating for me when I was up on the Hill, is you wouldn't be surprised at the number of Utah legislators that have never fully read the Constitution, that have never fully read the Utah Constitution. And one of the things that I'm going to do when I'm back east is to take the Constitution and give it to everybody to make sure that they read it and know what they're supposed to do.
I've heard from Gail many times about this issue. And Gail, what is my record on this?
You voted right.
I voted right, she says. Well, voting right is
Yes.
against the, so that's my record on this. And actually, I consider that a nuclear button. It's like we've got a plastic shield over the top. It's a constitutional mechanism. But you have to flip that and then push that red button. That's a big deal when you send off nuclear whatevers. It's a mechanism that we need to recognize is there. I just don't think it's time yet, and you don't need to ask me that question. You know where my record stands on that. Thank you.
I'm opposed to a con-con, and I'm also opposed to a conference of the states. The conference of the states is a constitutional convention in disguise. The problem with the Constitutional Convention, it's a way of amending the U.S. Constitution. It is allowed in the Constitution. That's why they call it an Article 5 convention. It's never been used. In the entire history of our country, it's never been used to amend the Constitution. And the reason why is because that's the process by which the Constitution was created. In other words, they came together to amend the Articles of Confederation, and what came out of that Constitutional Convention was a brand new Constitution. It's extremely dangerous.